start. Hello, everyone. My name is Bidii Blanco. I work at NAFSA. Welcome. So this is a part of our Gather to Go webinar series. This is our second one. The goal of this webinar series is to share knowledge and training and workshops, create opportunities for others to learn, uplift each other's work, and support Indigenous farmers by engaging in the full process of seed and food sovereignty. These gatherings are meant to connect with local BIPOC communities, highlight best practices, and create spaces of healing by healed people for community growth and resilience. I will now pass it on to Zachariah from Bidii Baby Foods to introduce himself.
Yes, thank you so much for having me this afternoon. And thank you for that introduction. So my name is Zachariah Ben. I am the owner and co-founder of Bidii Baby Foods. We specialize in producing traditional baby food near Shiprock, New Mexico on the Navajo Nation. Next slide, please. So yeah, today, Shay Zachariah Ben in Asia, yeah, Idina and Ashla, Ozeta Chili Bashachin, Kitachini Dashache, Ashay and Dashnella, Akut Aldana and Ashla. I was born and raised in Shiprock, New Mexico. I was born into a family of farmers, so I grew up farming all of my life, ever since I could remember. And from starting to plant alongside my father and my siblings to playing in the canals and drainage ditches and swimming in the river, and understanding that a lot of those practices that were founded in my development have now transitioned into the seventh generation and of farmers in training, as I like to say, which are my children. My wife and I, we have two children, and we have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and it's really exciting to be able to have them a part of these experiences, teaching them a lot about farming, and most importantly, teaching them about horizontal investment within your community and what type of impact that can cause. So with that, Bidii Baby Foods is a domestically incorporated on the Navajo Nation as a agricultural cooperative. And so with that, it has taught us a lot of navigation, and that navigation is introduction into Rezonomics. So it's an intersection between Western economics and reservation economics, and being able to combine the two and understand what are the best practices to navigate bureaucracy, red tape, um, nepotism, and most importantly, creating solutions, especially when working as an entrepreneur in tribal lands. So, for those of you that are starting and scaling a business on tribal lands, it comes down to having your own unique set of solutions to combat a lot of the challenges that are, I guess, in a way, get into your um, that in a way fall into a lot of your navigation. So with that, being able to talk about colonization and historical trauma, displacement as Indigenous people, the boarding school era, understanding um, the jurisdictional fragmentation between the layers of authority that surround us, especially in tribal lands. You're going through the tribe, federal, and then the state. From there to the land tenure system and understanding and navigating the trust lands versus private land, and how that can complicate a lot of growth and development as an entrepreneur or business on tribal lands. Next slide, please. So, starting with the legal and regulatory issues, trust line restrictions require a lot of jurisdictional oversight. And so, one of those being the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so, you would go through the federal approval process, and which is going to be very, very snail paced. And so this can deter a lot of development and outside investment from whether it be private corporations or young entrepreneurs that are coming into the area that want to build a business. And so from that to being able to understand that a lot of those trust land issues also create challenges in terms of capital access, which were also, traditional loan lending also don't, in a way, recognize, some permits and some um, um, land use permits. And so I think those are the things that really push back a lot of our young entrepreneurs from actually excelling and developing more on, just because of the trust land regulations. From there to taxation issues. So unclear or overlapping tax jurisdictions. So for us, we're based out of the Navajo Nation. So there's no um, tax that really is reinvested back into our communities or especially our businesses that want to create brick and mortar. So that leads to a lack of consistent oversight and or regulations. From there to federal oversight, being able to go through the Department of Justice to oversee the tribes and the movements that you want to create within your communities as an entrepreneur. So new leases or requests for tax exemption, etc., has to go through a long and slow formal hearing process. So these are some of the three main issues that really push us back as business owners and developers that are creating these solutions there on tribal trust lands. Next slide, please. So policy limitations. So lack of policies on various aspects that impact entrepreneurs' work results in having to create businesses off the reservation. From there to lack of regulation to poorly written existing policies. So for us at Bidii Baby Foods, we have to travel to a facility that's located in Gallup, New Mexico. That's where we can get all of our food certification in place that has oversight and regulations from the state of New Mexico. Right now, there is no publicly accessible commercial kitchen on the Navajo Nation, which very much contributes to a number of issues that we face. For example, food insecurity. How are you supposed to promote food policy and farm to school initiatives when you don't even have that oversight or a facility to accommodate those certifications in place to be able to go and get farm to school certified? Regulation. So, existing policies result in nepotism. So with that, and being able to not have that enforcement of these regulations or policies in place, it really becomes ambiguous that is then weaponized against producers or simply business owners that are developing and are pushed and shunned into areas in which that there are no judicial or rules and ethics that are abided by, and so because of that, it really deters you as a individual that is just trying to create a business that creates opportunity for your communities. Um, and so with that, the only food related policy that we have on the Navajo Nation is the Navajo Nation junk food tax, which even in that has little interpretation and a ton of gaps in that policy. And the only thing that, and to go in the depth of that is, we tax our own people on eating junk food when junk food is the only thing that is available on the reservations. We get organic foods, we get some fresh foods, but even then you're paying, triple the amount that you would, result in just like, well, I'm just gonna have to get spam, potatoes, and bread in order to get through the week. Would you rather spend, $20 on that or $20 on just one watermelon or two watermelons for the week? So you are, having to push our people into more poverty, but also, with that, with no little to no room of interpretation, that also, where is that junk food tax actually going and what type of investments is it actually impacting? And so um, for that, they say that a lot of the junk food tax is supposed to go to the local chapter houses where they can dip into that type of funding for community beautification, um, employment for youth through the summers that work that are specifically supposed to be working in like, community gardens, farmers, helping farmers, clearing of irrigation ditches, but a lot of that is just recycled back into general funds, which is just then dispersed without any structure. So a lot of these things hinder us as food producers, as farmers, as community members in understanding and how to create a healthy, positive impact as a business or as, farm to school. So with that, next slide, please. So infrastructure is a huge thing for us. So the land status often prevents farmers and food producers from being able to build or access necessary resources and infrastructure to start and build businesses. We have a banking desert here. The only access to a financial institution here on the Navajo Nation is Wells Fargo. So with that, there's lack of basic services and understanding the inability to grow yourself based off of that infrastructure. There's a lack of manufacturing slash processing infrastructure, limited commercial and industrial property. So specifically, this can include things like inadequate roads, broadband, water, and electricity, disconnects, and inability to build on agricultural slash grazing land, few or no local banks, difficulty accessing credit or investment capital, zoning and permitting obstacles on tribal land that delays or prevents development. So a lot of that forces businesses off the reservation to process, manufacture, and package and sell their products. So a lot of the basics of services that we receive here, for a prime example, internet, um, electricity and water. For us, we're operating on about 30 acres of farmland between Gadiahe and Shiprock, right there along the San Juan River. And so we don't have access to, fresh drinking water or electricity on the farm to be able to power a number of things. With that to broadband. The only broadband provider that we have is Frontier, which is very, very, um, I guess you could say, just a bunch of issues with their connectivity. So, we have to rely on satellite um, internet services in order to get internet there. So our programmers, our farmer residence programs, are able to have access to internet so they can do their schoolwork, or ourselves, simply replying to emails and such, becomes such an obstacle sometimes, simply taking a Zoom meeting as well. So all these things, just the basic services of that. Printing, there is no publicly accessible printing area there. So if you wanted some documentation, you would have to go to, in quotes, town, which is located an hour to hour and a half of travel time. And that's just one way to be able to access all of these necessary services and infrastructure. Um, from there, the lack of manufacturing and processing infrastructure for us as a food producer, we have to travel to Gallup, which is 114 miles from the farm. And so, that is every year we're making multiple trips. So we're, having to add into a lot of our expenses and fuel, car maintenance, and those are the things that really become a heavy toll because we don't have a publicly accessible um, commercial kitchen in our area to be able to manufacture and process a lot of our products there. We just recently acquired a business site lease there in Shiprock. It's about 1.5 acres. Uh, Even with securing that, the commercial and industrial properties that are there, we don't have access to electricity immediately. We would have to pay for those types of hookups. And so those are things, again, that deter a lot of our entrepreneurs from actually developing there. So if you were to ever drive through the reservation, you would just think like, wow, there's so much, what would look like a lot of opportunity, a lot of land, but a lot of it is idle. And those are the things that are not enforced. For example, agricultural land use permits. And, a lot of people hang on to them for 4 more years that remain idle, but in our rules and regulations, they're supposed to reallocate it to the next of kin, or reallocated back to the Navajo Nation so they can then put it in a lottery and then give it to individuals that are ready to farm and have the necessary documentation and assets to farm. But all of that is overlooked or is not enforced. So it prevents us from, as young producers, simply as a farmer, to go and gain access to these lands. And now, as a business owner, business site lease holder, it's very difficult to now, understand what would be the best investment and what would be the gamble that do we build a brick and mortar, would we own that building for generations, or do we go modular? So those are the things that we have to like gamble with and understand. um, Next slide, please. So another huge issue, of course, is probably be the number one is access to capital. So when running a business on tribal lands, Indigenous entrepreneurs face a big barrier to accessing capital through traditional methods due to lack of land ownership. Some challenges include federal/tribal limits, so inadequate support or overly complex grants/loan programs. And so within that, like, you know, understanding that support of applying for a USDA multi-million dollar multi-year grant is such a tedious application process. And for us is if you look at it from us a more closer look at it, like we as farmers, we're busy out on the farm. We have to get the seeds in place, we have to teach our young farmers and operate the equipment, and so all of that time that's invested into that, then you invest more time into these grant applications where you don't know if you would get them in the long run, but you spend like 20 hours applying for a 30 to 40 page grant application. And so those are the things that you would have to understand and really have to push through as a farmer/slash business owner. From there to traditional loan programs of using and leveraging a lot of the land that we do have access to through sublease agreements. And so those are the things that I feel like are very looked over. And so, in order to get and secure a loan from a traditional bank, you need 50 to 75 years of a LU, as an LUP holder, a land use permit holder, but they only allow up to about 25 years at a time. So, those are things like you have to navigate and, have to move around in order to gain access to federal loan programs and grant opportunities. From there to the lack of bank money institutions around locally. So there are few to no community development funding institutions or tribal banks. And a lot of those programs that are able to lend us using non-traditional tools and methods. And so Raven Capital is a huge one as a good example. We have not received any funding from them, but they're a good example of like a relationship-based lending opportunity. So by understanding your business model, the type of gaps that you're filling, and so they're looking more traditionally towards what type of impact a social impact are you gonna create with your business or your product that they are able to make these investments in. And so those are some of the areas in which that we feel like that would be a better route. Right now, the only CDFI that we have on the Navajo Nation that is Navajo Nation backed, I guess you could say, is the Change Labs. And so, even then that they are a loan program. And so for as a small business owner, sometimes, having financial literacy or the credit to be able to gain access to this funding, you would have to, basically go in debt. So that's just again another way of, just that lack of access to capital. From there to financial literacy. So the lack of knowledge/slash experience finding, applying for, and managing grant funds and loans, etc. So, as Indigenous folks or just basically just people living on the res, like we don't have good credit. And I think that's something for me that I learned, and I'm still learning to this day is, managing your credit. What do your scores look like? How does it affect your business and your growth and development as a business? Because those are areas in which that, are you good at handling debt? Are you good at, handling money? How do you treat credit? How do you treat money that is not yours, but it is available to fund specific things in your everyday living situations. And so, those are areas in which that, for example, we have some business owners here that work to co-sign vehicles for their family members because they have the equity, they have the cash flow, and these family members don't. Um, but they'll, co-sign just because, oh, I feel bad for them, or I'm here to support them because this is what I intended to build my business for in the first place. So, those are areas in which that, you just don't have that knowledge or experience and being able to take care of your own credit, create that worthiness, that trust, and being able to now, create opportunity through capital access. Next slide. Another great thing too is workforce and education. So it can be challenging to build a business with limited educational and workforce development opportunities in your community that cause things like high unemployment rates here on the reservation, educational gaps, burnout, lack of specialized workforce, and limited youth engagement. So for us, here on the reservation, we have high unemployment rates, just because of the lack of businesses that are sustainable and that also pay more than the minimum wage. I believe right now, currently, Navajo Nation's minimum wage is around like still sitting at 8.50 an hour. So, that's not going to meet the current living wage. That's for sure. That won't get you to get an apartment anytime soon. To, separate yourself from your multi-generational, multi-family housing, 3 bedrooms and 10 people that are stuck in that 3 bedrooms, trying to find a job. So, those high employment rates just are, just constant. And those are the things that when we started our business, we wanted to contribute to by hiring off-season and seasonal laborers to be able to come in and build these skills with them, from chainsaw maintenance and operation to CDL driving, heavy equipment hauling, heavy equipment use. And those are the areas in which that it just really bleeds out into like the lack of specialized workforce and building up those skills, having that youth engagement, the educational gaps, and pushing them to, okay, now that you're secure financially, now that you've secured a job with us, what are you doing to pursue your education? What are you doing to, are you going to go to school? Are you going to go into industrial, hands-on work? Are you going to do, what are you doing? And so, those areas we still get to mentor on. And of course, the burnout rate. It is a lot to handle. Um, it can be a lot to handle areas of a business. For example, myself, I'm the farmer of the business. Like I go out, I farm. I can handle the workforce, the tractor work, the mapping of the crops that we're going to be working with, and getting those sublease agreements signed. If a problem arises on the farm, I can take care of it. But who's taking care of the grants? Who's taking care of the admin? Who's taking care of the record keeping, and ensuring that, we are in contact with our funders, with our reports for different grant opportunities. And so, that would be my wife who does those things. And so really play into your strengths or hire outside those skills that you lack. We both don't have the time or um, um, the time, but we do have the revenue to be able to, hire an accountant, for example. So that way we could prevent burnout. That way we can prevent, not creating more opportunities for our young ones and for our community to be able to have access to an employment place. From there to, lack of specialized workforce. I think for us, we've also engaged a lot of our um, local resources. They do have a couple of like workforce solutions in Farmington. I know Navajo Nation has a workforce office as well that provides summer youth employment, and those are areas that we're able to tap into and bring some of those individuals onto the site to be able to have access to a site for employment and structure. Limited youth engagement. A lot of our youth, are struggling with a lot of those historical intergenerational traumas. And, for us, using the land to heal um, those individuals. And I feel like that is something for a lot of individuals that don't easily get access to. And so, using that farm as a as a site to be able to have those people make those connections, make our young ones feel that connection and engage in their work ethic, engage in their skill set, and push them to certain limits. For example, persevering through the heat. What does that teach us culturally, when it's spiritually? When you start to persevere through the heat of the sun, that you learn to take care of yourself. You're going to make sure you're hydrated, you're wearing the right type of apparel to prevent sun from burning you out, to being able to bring in individuals that can mentor some of the youth, and persevering through a lot of some of these like challenges and build up their character, build up their work ethic, build up who they are as young leaders. And so those are the areas and opportunities that we see in workforce and education, is using the land to engage our youth and provide that and foster that healing. So that leads us into, trauma. What are we healing from? So the cultural and social components of who we are is, the majority of Indigenous entrepreneurs shape businesses around their desire to solve a social problem faced in the community or to support their families. However, this can come at a cost. So social entrepreneurship, being able to set ourselves and use ourselves as an example of like, basically, I made it. I made it out of the res. But what does that mean? Why is that? Why do you have to make it out of the res to make it? And to look successful. And so those are the things like, when we created this brand, our intention was to create healthy traditional foods for our firstborn, and no understanding that there's a lack or no access to traditional foods for our 0 to 5 year old children who are um, gaining access or developing into solid foods, like and understanding solid foods. And so, for us, was it going to be Gerber? Was it going to be Gerber that was going to be taking care of our baby, when we pride ourselves as a culture and as a community? We pride ourselves in saying that, we have our culture, we have our language, we have our ceremonies, but we don't have access to traditional baby food. Why is that? And why is it seasonal? Why isn't it not an everyday available normal thing to have, you know, um, Navajo dry steamed corn cereal for our young ones to gain access to? And so all these questions arose, and these questions really hit when, when we went through our first birth. We went through our first birth with our son. We're like thinking to ourselves like we're parents now, but also, we're farmers. We want to create an environment for our children to thrive in. And in order for our children to thrive in that environment, we need to develop a farm. We need to develop a business. And this is what one thing led to another. And so that's that social entrepreneurship component. We didn't get to make these products and get rich quick. That was not our intention. It wasn't our intention to build a pyramid of capitalism and then we stand on the top of that pyramid. No, our intention was to create horizontal investment, and growth, so that impacts everybody that's by our side. And so that's that social entrepreneurial component where we're using Rezonomics to be able to navigate that, but also make those intentional, impactful investments within our community using our own brand. From there to trauma response, creating a farmer in residence program where we bring in these young individuals to heal from a lot of the historical intergenerational traumas and understanding that you know, how do we get past the imposter syndrome? How do we get past the helplessness and lateral violence that we receive within our own communities? And being able to navigate that pedagogy of oppression has been a huge, huge, huge obstacle for ever since we've started. The nepotism that, derives within our own community, the jealousy, the crabs in a bucket. Why are you better than me? You need to come back down here and feel what I'm feeling and understand that it takes survival to create a better person. And just because I'm a survivor, you're thriving over there, I have more experience. So getting to navigate a lot of that and teaching our youth that while being on the farm, this is how we can heal from that. And that's something that I always love to share is that entrepreneurship for myself as an individual has been healing for me, has been teaching me just the basics, of course, of, financial literacy, reporting, taxes, um, how to be a good business partner, how to be a good parent, and a partner in life. All these components really create such a strong dynamic between my partner and I, and being able to respond to our young individuals who are having to navigate that now as they start to scale their farms and develop their own businesses. So from that to sharing is caring. How do you navigate reciprocity within your community? Yes, you want to create a brand that is readily available and accessible. And that was our first couple of years, within Bidii Baby Foods is like we'll donate a couple £100 there or £100 there for a ceremony, for a food bank, for schools and such. But, you're losing out on money that could have gone to more length in hours for your workforce. That could have extended their payroll or fuel for the tractor or fees that you have to face as an entrepreneur for the certifications that you're going through. So that sharing is caring mentality really comes into a difficult part of yourself. And this is something that I've had to navigate. And it's hard for me because I believe in community. I believe in, sharing resources. A good example of this is like even to this day, I'm still having to tell myself like, I do have a strong workforce. I have young individuals that are there. And so I just have this tendency to buy them lunch every day. But that's like, even dinner sometimes. And, even though we do tell them to bring their own lunch or snacks and such, sometimes I can recognize burnout or I can recognize that they just aren't coming from a structured home. So they come to work hungry. And so that gets me in the feels and I end up spending $100 a day on their food, just so we can get through the work day or work week or season. So, how do I, instead of giving them a handout or instead of, having to donate all the time or create a business that is basically giving products out for free, what's that reciprocity look like? Because you're going to need it eventually. That's going to be that'll create a sustainable business. That'll create a business that allows you to continue to make investments in your community, whether it be through employment, opportunity through the products that you're creating, and the services that you're providing for your community. And those are the things that you would have to navigate, and it can be very, very difficult. But again, I'm still navigating that. I'm still learning that, and those are things that I understand that um, if I stop buying lunch, then that'll teach them to start providing for themselves with what we've been paying, their payroll. So all these things from that to you know um, only setting a set amount of donations per year. So for us, we've set it down from which was like probably like 30 to 40% donated back to our communities in the first couple of years, to now we've set a limit. We're like, okay, we give out 10% of what we, our whether it be our harvest or sponsorships that come across our email, where we're able to set aside 10% of what we are back into that, knowing that we've created such a social, impactful business model already, and not feeling selfish or that imposter syndrome of like, am I good enough or am I providing enough as a community member slash business owner? So with that, many Indigenous communities expect individuals to share resources. And if an entrepreneur is trying to save money to start slash scale their business, they can face negative talk from the community, regardless of the intent behind their business. And so another personal example is my father, and my mother. Like when we first started this business, they would ask, can I borrow this much? Can I borrow this much? It became so ridiculous to the point to where I was paying for their gas, their food, and their time to come out and have quality time with their grandkids. So set up boundaries and stick to those boundaries, and that'll protect you as an individual and as a business owner, or as a business that wants to be sustainable to continue to have these social impacts within your community based off of the business model that you develop. Next slide, please. So from there to market access and who we are as Bidii Baby Foods, and for those of you, working in food. So tribal communities have little to no private enterprises. The majority of infrastructure and markets are either public slash tribal buildings, or in corporations from a tribal entity, or fast food restaurants, gas stations, and many of these markets already have established supply chains or food safety requirements that do not support small businesses. Markets that may exist in non-tribal communities often do not exist on the reservation, so making market access more difficult and expensive slash time consuming to transport. So a lot of that, we can have that next slide. So with that, a lot of our sales options for farmers and food producers here on the reservation, you have your institutions, you have your direct to consumer, your grocery stores, non-fine dining, and fine dining options. So institutions look like local school districts, food banks, childcare programs, elder care facilities, and Indian Health Service cafeterias slash menus for patients. From there to direct to consumer. You got your farmers markets, flea markets, roadside, farm stands and sales, community supported agricultural CSAs, and online marketplace, e-commerce basically. And you got your grocery stores. So for us on the Navajo Nation, we only have Bash's is our only grocery store here locally. So you got your grocery stores, you got your gas stations that also hold on to some type of groceries. I guess just the essentials like, potted meat, preserved meat like Spam, bread, tortillas, and like taco mix and stuff like, and little like 1 pounders of like ground beef is what they'll provide at gas stations, knowing that there's such a stretch before you can actually get more groceries. Bodegas that are set up, like our little strip malls, like there in Winter Rock, for example. So from there to fine dining, we got our high-end restaurants, farm-to-table experiences, and non-fine dining options like our local restaurants, like our food stands, fast food, food trucks, examples of that. So the sales options, that's our marketplace here, as you can see. Next slide. So immediately on the reservation, on tribal lands, basically, we don't have fine dining. We don't have five-star restaurants here. We don't have farm-to-table experiences that you can pay for, $100 per plate to get this experience where you're eating in a greenhouse from freshly picked produce. Like, you don't have that. We don't have non-fine dining options. And so, that's like the fast food where, they already have Cisco to come and supply them with, hundreds and hundreds of pounds of ground beef and that are frozen, or, bread that's, baked elsewhere and comes in. So So they don't exist already have a supply chain. So next slide. So direct to consumer are some of the easier options or like the goal. And so with that, it's easy to participate in, but becomes unaffordable for most community members and can result in food waste. And so, for example, a lot of like the farmers markets that we went to were very time consuming because you're having to go out first thing in the morning and it's a gamble. It's a gamble. You don't know what the economic status of that week could be. You actually kind of have to shoot for the first of the month. You have to shoot for the first of the month, and knowing that I will sell out or almost sell out, guaranteed because it is the first of the month. Everybody gets paid in that sense, and so that or hitting them up on Fridays and Saturdays, and you're having to navigate and take a gamble on that. So if you make something fresh for that day that does not fall in line with, everybody getting paid, then you're not falling in line and that results in food waste. You're having to get rid of that food for cheap, which is lost, um, investment. To if you're making 200 loaves of banana bread and you only sell 10 of those, then you got to sell like at least 50 of those to finally get, somewhere to get gas and make back what you owe, and what you invested in. So, just like all the math don't math. Um, and from there you would have to sell at a higher rate in order to, make back what you've invested so far. Which, you're basically breaking even most of the time because not a lot of people on the reservation can afford anything more than like $5. So, those are the things that you have to really consider and but it's easy to participate in. From there, next slide. So these are highlighted in yellow because there is a catch. The catch is becoming certified, which equals costs to get, go out, get the buyer producer networking going, and a dietitian that is, contracting an individual to come in. The dietitian that we work closely with is Diné with Tumblebee Nutrition. And so, go check her out and her website. But she was essential in becoming certified. So she would do like our nutritional analysis, so we can put nutritional labeling on our packaging and our products that we've created. So that gets us into grocery stores create where we've created this retail opportunity, to get into bashes, to get into these gas stations, and from there to institutions, who now, with that certification in place of becoming farm to school certified through the state of New Mexico, through the New Mexico Grown Program. This program is a farm to institution program where the state allocates funding to institutions across the state of New Mexico. So that funding is then invested into local producers to become farm to school certified through tier one, tier two food safety trainings. Um, and so once you take the trainings, you create this farm map, you create a risk assessment, and then from there, abide by those regulations. And then from there, you have the opportunity to be put on an approved supplier list where it says that you're an approved supplier. So you have the certifications in place, you meet the food safety standards, and you are within guidelines. And so within that, you can then sell to those programs. So those two options is what takes up about 80% of our sales, at Bidii Baby Foods. Direct to consumer takes around like 15%. And so 5% of that again goes into, donating back into our communities, in terms of markets. And also, about, another, yeah, about 10% goes into donations slash, e-commerce. So that's where we have our online website that, is not really sustainable in terms of, the whole year of having to package and fulfill a lot of the products without breaking the bank for our consumers. So the most beneficial that we've seen and most, ROI, return of investment, that we've seen was the institutions. So there you go. Next slide, please. So successful approaches. So these are the solutions to what we've endured and navigated, since the development of Bidii Baby Foods back in 2021. So within this, we've created since then, since 2021, we've created a hybrid business model. So we have our LLC on one arm, and we have, which is Bidii Baby Foods, and then we have our 501(c)(3, our nonprofit. Since we're a social entrepreneurial model where we make these intentional investments back into our community and create these programs that, have our youth come and become new farmers and gain access to land and water, like these are opportunities that we build here. So with that, we're able to, um, get grants with one arm or build up revenue in the other, and then create investment through employment payroll to programming and stipends for our young farmers in training and farmers in residence. And so this is how we're able to make those investments there, where we're able to, in a way, engage our youth, engage our farmers. And so within that, legal. So from the first slide, legal, how do we navigate that? And so from there, gaining access to land is a huge issue. It's something that's not enforced, as I will kind of recollect a lot of that from the first slide of like, gaining access to a land use permit. So within that, if it becomes idle and it sits there, it's good to go up and talk with those individuals that hold on to the LUP and get a sublease agreement and then start using that land again. The reason why we push for this area of things is on the reservation rather than investing in private land is although it is very difficult to go through the tribal process or get these sublease agreements, you receive more lateral violence. But you know, would we rather make those investments and see our land rights and water rights being put to use, or would we just go and privatize and just go out buy some private land off reservation and not have to deal with any of that? So, everything that we have done is very intentional in community development. From there, getting sublease agreements to gain access to land, to water, specifically agricultural land use permits. And then from there, my grandmother is in the works of getting our land use permit transferred from her name to my name. So, building that generational wealth there. Retain representation, being able to have a lawyer on retention. So that way you are represented well, and people know that you are serious in who you are as an incorporation and document everything. Document the meetings you go to. There are a lot of informal word of mouth or non-legal binding agreements that people will, from a simple handshake to a verbal agreement, document those interactions, document those moments because they will come back and bite you if you don't. And that's just kind of something that, we've learned from, and that's why everything should be written. Everything should have a paper trail, whether it be a simple email, a phone call, just let people know that you're recording because that protects you, your business, and the legitimacy of that business and yourself. Policy. Engage in council. Council delegates for the Navajo Nation seem to have more push and pull for our oversights of different departments. For example, Department of Agriculture, if we wanted something done through them, we would have to go to the council delegates in order to push Department of Ag to, move on a land use permit transfer or engage in funding opportunities, which we still have not received any. But, those are some of the things that, engaging in council is a lot faster, which has actually got our land use, our business site lease permit, in a way, got it within the year rather than waiting 10 or 5 years to receive a business site lease. Engage in policy groups on and off the reservation. And I say that strongly because we are a part of the Shiprock, not Shiprock, we are a part of the New Mexico Farmers Market Association, the New Mexico Grown Program. We are part of annually the state legislation that happens because they are making those um, educated and impactful investments into us as producers of New Mexico. And so it's good to engage in policy from that. Um, what are the other ones? There's some that are based in DC that have helped us a lot, like the Native Farm Bill Coalition. So being able to engage in those policy groups creates those connections that will build up your policy back at home, and most importantly, protect those programs that surround you to be able to make those investments impactfully within the tribal areas. Follow state and federal guidance. We say that because when in doubt, don't wait on the tribe. And so those are the things that, being able to follow state and federal guidance and policy and use that as a template to implement that back at home on tribal lands. Infrastructure. Go off res. Don't be afraid to go off a reservation. If it's such a headache, if it's such a, passion project, go off reservation to be able to make those opportunities and build them up. So that way you can build up income, you can build up assets. And with that all built up, then you're able to come back to the reservation and invest um, your time, your skills, your business, and that's how you'll be able to make a long-term sustainable model. From there, if you're on the reservation, build modular. Because you would rather pick up and go than lose millions and millions of dollars worth of investment and time into a building that you do not own. Because again, as I kept stating, like it's a business site lease that we've recently acquired. And so we're going to go modular. We were thinking of, this big old fancy multi-million dollar facility that was going to be brick and mortar, but, would we actually own that plot? No. Would we actually own the building after our lease is up? No. So those are the things that, building modular was actually the key to moving forward. Utilize incubators and hubs that are surrounding you. Those are opportunities where you get to hear more presentations like this. For example, a good one is New Mexico Community Capital out of Albuquerque. They have a ton of incubators and hub programs. I think NAFSA has a couple, I believe. And just look at your state resources in terms of what is out there for capital investment and interest to be able to, gain access to those subs incubators and hubs. Social components, set goals. This just really helps you to, as an entrepreneur, when you're first starting out, it's a passion project, it's a dream. But how do you make that into a relevant, sustainable, and impactful move? And so that's why you're setting these goals. I think for me, being able to understand a lot of, my self-growth as a business owner slash individual, you have to set those goals. Like, how do I get past trauma? All right, I'm gonna go take therapy, or I'm gonna talk to my partner about these things, and that will help me understand myself and create these goals that once I complete them, I am a better, not necessarily a better person, but a uh, um, more grown person that will, be able to take on more challenges down the road. And then from there, ROI is a business term of return of investment. So for us, I like to look at it as a return of impact. What are you doing to make these investments and what type of impact are you causing for your community? And again, that's that horizontal investment mentality rather than creating a pyramid. And that will differentiate us from capitalism because we're creating these decolonized autonomous organizations. From there to hold your boundaries, hold your boundaries against family, community, elected officials, like that'll just protect you in the long run. That'll prevent burnout in the long run. And that's something that may seem cruel right offhand, but when you start hitting those moments where it's like, I've given this person all of my support and they're still not learning, they're still not growing, I guess I got to put up a boundary. Then you'll understand that part of it. And it's not being selfish. It's about, you know, building yourself up now to make investments down the road. And so a good example of that is when I was growing up, my wife would tell me a lot about like, I would always give money to my family, but she's like, you could have spent that on this that is more practical and is better for our future. And it's better because when you grow more of that person, then you're able to make investments down the road. Then you can build your family a house down the road. Then you can, buy them a car if you need to, knowing that you're secure and you have a sustainable model. I was like, that makes a lot of sense. So holding those boundaries in the moment would create better opportunity in the future. Marketplace, e-commerce is a huge one. We use Square for a lot of our online websites and sales, which also you can just run off programming for reports quite easily. From there to QuickBooks is a huge one for us as well. And that helps with our accounting because it just is so convenient to be able to plug everything into um, one application so that way you can manage all of your finances there quickly and reports quickly. So from there to, off-res options of like, the farmers markets that they may have off reservation to, of course, for us on our prime example and what makes up, again, 80% of our sales is institutions located off reservation. The local school districts that a lot of our families participate in, food banks that our people drive to, that border the reservation line and state and federal programs like the New Mexico Growing Program, the New Mexico Farmers Market Association, all have been areas that have been able to improve and create better market access for us as a food producer. Capital, improve financial literacy. So take, credit classes and understand credit. From there to understanding loans. So we as Bidii Baby Foods slash the Ben Initiative slash as a family are currently not in debt because, we have not taken out a loan yet. I say yet because there are going to be some big, heavy financial investments here pretty soon that we're going to have to make. But, it's good to understand and navigate those areas without, going into our fifth year business, we have not accrued any debt yet. So those are the opportunities of what being able to improve financial literacy and its goal setting does for yourself as an individual and as a business. Grants are a huge, huge player into who we are as this hybrid business model. So find different grant opportunities out there. Find the TA, the technical assistance that will go along with these grants. And then from there, I know right off the bat, the grant plant is based here in New Mexico, and they help with grant applications and such, which then leads into fiscal sponsors. Finding that nonprofit that doesn't fish for your data or, that will take it and run with it, but fiscal sponsors that will take care of those grants, that will take care of the reporting, so that way you don't have to and you can build up your business slash venture that you're starting into. From there to more cooperatives, that cooperative structure of like, for example, this year we're working with a local farmer who has land. So in exchange for that, we're offering up our grant writing services, our TA in that. We're offering our equipment and expertise and technical assistance in traditional farming. And so, being able to have that reciprocity, they're offering us land and water that we can grow on and literally and figuratively, but also, we're offering back, all these other components and creating this cooperative. And that builds up community, that builds up relationships that will, last for generations. And that's as you can consider it like a barter system that, we're able to have that relationship based lending, I guess you could say, or investment. Um, from there to the workforce, set and hold expectations for your workforce and put up goals for themselves to grow through whatever challenges they may be going through. And that's what you do as a work site is, or as an employer, is you're creating that opportunity. Now, how do you create that? How do you protect and create a culture based off of the business model and business that you're creating, and protect that culture. Don't just hire any old Joe to come in and disrupt the workplace environment when you've set it a certain way and you like it a certain way, and you have that ability to again set and hold those expectations. From there to the work development support offices through the state. We work closely with a lot of community service workers who put in, 24 hours to 48 hours in a week for us. And we become that site. And it's funny because it's like word of mouth has gone around that we are a CSW site, a community service worker site, and they can work out their hours with us there on the farm. And it's like it's really amazing to hear back a lot of the feedback from these volunteers is they'll come in and be like, gosh, there's nobody else local. A lot of the programming or work sites that were recommended were off reservation, hour plus away, 2 hour round trip. I don't have a vehicle. Um, you know, the I don't have the transportation means to meet that, but you guys are local. You guys are literally 5 minutes to 10 minutes down the road from me, and I was able to, either walk here or catch a ride here. So, thank you for being local. So from there to outsource to, and again, when you outsource, you find those programs that are out there that have youth, and all you have to do is just become a certified work site. You have your employer handbook, you have your SOPs, your standard operating procedures ready, you have your first aid kit simply ready to go as well. Like, being able to outsource that, become a nice work site where individuals can come and work down volunteer hours or work down where a program is already paying for their payroll. All they have to do is find a site. So those are some of the outsourcing that you can work on to be able to gain access to that workforce. Next slide. Yeah, so, questions. I think I see a couple that had popped up in the chat. Um, but other than that, here is our contact information. Please take a look at our website. If you have Instagram, take a look at our Instagram there and follow our journey. We love posting about what we're doing on the farm for that day, week, season. And of course, if you have any questions in the near future, in the future overall, just hit us up via email and we're happy to answer those questions. We're a resource in Native entrepreneurship. We're a resource in navigating historical traumas, intergenerational traumas, and I think to leave off with like or to leave off with, we've developed an LLC, we've developed a 501(c)(3, we've managed both successfully. So, use this as a resource and how you have navigated that. And that is where my other hat comes in. I'm working as a consultant with West, which is a program where we go out and mentor young, not young, but just entrepreneurs that are starting to develop their business. So, that's where my other hat comes into play and helping other entrepreneurs successfully develop and sustain their businesses on or off the reservation. So, again, give us a follow. But with that, definitely understand that you as a business owner or a community member that is providing for your community, like, don't give up in that sense because, a healthy environment is healthy children. And that is something that we've built there on the farm. That is something that we're building with our family and, continuing to make those investments locally, impactfully. It starts with yourself. And be the they, instead of saying they should do that, they should do this, they should start this. No, no, be the they, be that change, be that bridge, be that solution to, a lot of the challenges that we face today. So yeah, thank you all so much. And thank you so much for NAFSA for hosting me today to be able to talk about some of these issues and solutions and bringing that down to the table. So thank you all so much. Yeah.
Artlist.io